Captain Renee Washington never planned to become a police officer. Growing up in a modest neighborhood on the east side of Minneapolis, she had witnessed her fair share of tense interactions between police and residents. Her father, a city bus driver, and her mother, a hospital receptionist, had raised her to respect authority but also to question injustice when she saw it. At 22, with a criminal justice degree freshly in hand, Renee joined the Minneapolis Police Department. She was one of only 3 black women in her academy class of 35 recruits. From day one, she stood out, not just because of her appearance in a predominantly white male department, but because of her approach to policing. She never saw being an officer as having power over people, remembered Sergeant Tom Klein, who supervised Renee during her rookie years. She saw it as having responsibility for people. While other new officers requested assignments in quieter, more affluent neighborhoods, Renee specifically asked to patrol areas similar to where she grew up. She walked the same streets where she had played as a child, now wearing a badge and uniform that some in the community viewed with suspicion. Renee's rise through the department ranks came steadily but not without challenges. She faced the double barriers of being both black and female in a system that had historically favored neither. Yet her arrest record was impressive, her paperwork immaculate, and her community connections invaluable. When she passed the sergeant's exam with the highest score in her cohort, even her critics couldn't deny her capabilities. As a sergeant, Renee started a youth mentorship program that paired officers with local teenagers. The program focused on building understanding between young people and police before problems developed. Many of those teens later credited the program with changing their life trajectory. Captain Washington showed us that cops are just people with a job to do, said Marcus Jenkins, now 26, who had participated in the program as a troubled teen. She also showed us that we could be anything we wanted, including police officers, if that's what we chose. By her 15th year on the force, Renee had been promoted to lieutenant. 3 years after that, she made captain, the first black woman to reach that rank in the department's history. A formal ceremony marked the occasion, with the mayor and police chief both delivering speeches praising her dedication. Off duty, Renee's life centered around her family. She had married her college sweetheart, David, an elementary school principal, and they had 2 teenagers, Maya and Jamal. Sunday dinners at her parents' house remained a sacred tradition, even as her responsibilities at work grew. She taught Sunday school at New Hope Baptist Church and volunteered monthly at the local food bank. Renee never changed who she was, no matter what title they gave her, said her mother, Gloria Washington. Always humble, always thinking about how to help others. Captain Washington's most recent initiative had been a comprehensive review of the department's community policing strategies. She conducted listening sessions in neighborhoods across the city, meeting residents in their own community spaces rather than asking them to come to police headquarters. No one, least of all Renee herself, could have predicted how a routine drive home one Friday night would put everything she had worked for to the test, and how her response would ultimately transform not just her department, but policing approaches nationwide. The evening of April 12th started like many others for Captain Renee Washington. She had stayed late at the community center in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, listening to residents' concerns about recent car break-ins. The meeting ran longer than expected, with many people wanting a moment of her time. By the time she headed to her car, the street lights had been on for hours. "You're making a difference, Captain," said Mrs. Johnson, an elderly resident who had caught up with Renee in the parking lot. "First time in 40 years I feel like someone in that uniform is actually listening." Renee smiled, touched by the woman's word. The rain fell harder now, drops glistening in the harsh police lights as Captain Washington stood beside her car, hands raised as instructed. Despite the damp cold seeping through her clothes, her voice remained steady. "Officers, I'm Captain Renee Washington of the North Precinct. My badge and ID are in my purse on the passenger seat. I'm coming home from a community meeting." Officer Kowalski kept his weapon trained on her. "Ma'am, we've had a report of an armed robbery. Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle." Renee complied, though confusion and concern clouded her thoughts. This was standard procedure for a suspect, not a routine traffic stop. Something was very wrong, but her years of training told her to follow commands now and sort it out later. "I understand, officer. I'm a police captain. My department ID will confirm my identity," she said while facing her car, hands placed carefully on the wet roof. Officer Bell approached cautiously, his boots splashing through puddles. "Spread your feet and don't move," he ordered, his voice tense. From across the street, Marcus Gaines continued recording. 2 more bystanders had stopped now, watching the scene unfold. One woman, holding an umbrella, called out, "That's Captain Washington. What are you doing?" The officers ignored the growing audience. Bell patted Renee down with quick, rough movements that lacked the professional courtesy typically extended to a fellow officer. Finding no weapons, he grabbed her wrists and pulled them behind her back. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around Renee's wrists, tight enough to bite into her skin. 22 years on the force, and she had never been on this side of an arrest. The indignity of the moment wasn't lost on her, but neither was the danger. She knew that resistance or argument could escalate the situation. "Officers, check my ID. Call Sergeant Phillips at dispatch. They'll confirm who I am," Renee said, keeping her voice calm despite the rain now running down her face. "Stop talking," Kowalski ordered, gripping her arm and turning her toward the squad car. By now, 6 bystanders had gathered, most with phones recording. Mrs. Johnson from the community meeting had driven by and stopped her car, horrified at what she was seeing. "That's the police captain. She was just at our neighborhood meeting," the elderly woman shouted from her car window. Officer Bell glanced nervously at the growing crowd but continued the arrest procedure. "We'll sort this out at the station," he said, opening the rear door of the patrol car. As they moved toward the vehicle, a 3rd patrol car pulled up, lights flashing. Lieutenant Mark Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran who had worked with Renee for over a decade, stepped out and immediately recognized her. "Hold up. What's going on here?" Rodriguez called out, rushing toward them. "Possible robbery suspect," Officer Bell replied, still holding Renee's arm. "That's Captain Washington, you idiots." Rodriguez's voice cut through the rain. "Uncuff her right now." A look of horror slowly spread across the younger officers' faces as recognition dawned. Kowalski fumbled with the handcuff keys while Bell stood frozen, his face pale despite the colored lights flashing around them. The crowd had grown to more than a dozen people now, their murmurs rising as they witnessed the scene. Marcus Gaines had been live-streaming the entire incident, and notifications were already lighting up phones across the city. As the handcuffs came off, Renee rubbed her wrists, feeling the indentations where the metal had dug into her skin. She could have exploded in justified anger. She could have threatened careers or filed immediate complaints. The officers stood before her, eyes downcast, waiting for the storm. Instead, Captain Washington took a deep breath and looked at the gathering crowd, the recording phones, and the 3 fellow officers. In that moment, she made a decision that would later be described as extraordinary, a choice that would reverberate through the department and eventually across the country. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," she said, her voice clear despite the rain, "I'd like to speak with these officers privately at the station, and I think we're going to need the chief for this conversation." The precinct hummed with nervous energy as Captain Washington sat in Conference Room B, a cup of untouched coffee cooling in front of her. Her wet clothes clung uncomfortably to her skin, but she maintained perfect posture, her face a mask of professional calm. Officers passing by the glass walls shot curious glances her way, word of the incident spreading through the station like wildfire. Inside the room, Chief Thomas Parker paced back and forth, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. At 62, Parker had seen nearly everything in his 37 years of service, but never something like this. "I got the mayor calling me, Renee. The video's already hit social media," he said, running a hand over his thinning gray hair. "It's spreading fast." Renee nodded, checking her phone. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages. Her husband David had sent 4 worried texts after seeing the video. "Where are Officers Kowalski and Bell?" she asked. "Waiting in my office," Chief Parker replied. "Honestly, they look like they're about to throw up." Lieutenant Rodriguez knocked and entered without waiting for a response. "Captain, I got your purse and car keys. Your car's being brought to the station parking lot." He placed her belongings on the table and hesitated. "The press is gathering outside. Channel 5 and the Tribune both have reporters here already." "Thank you, Mark," Renee said. Her voice betrayed none of the complex emotions swirling inside her. The door opened again, and Internal Affairs Captain Sandra Miller entered, her notebook already in hand. "Captain Washington, I need to start taking your statement." Always by the book, Miller had built her career on thoroughness and strict adherence to procedure. "In a minute, Sandra," Chief Parker interrupted. "Renee, how do you want to handle this? Those two officers. Well, there's no excuse, but they're young. This could end their careers." Renee finally took a sip of her cold coffee, considering her response carefully. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "Bring them in," she said finally. 3 minutes later, Officers Kowalski and Bell stood before her, their uniforms perfectly pressed, but their faces ashen. Kowalski, a stocky 26-year-old with red hair, couldn't meet her eyes. Bell, taller and 2 years older, stared at a point on the wall just above her head. "Officers," Renee began, her voice level, "I understand there was a robbery tonight." Both men looked confused at this opening question. "Yes, Captain," Bell answered hesitantly. "At the mini-mart on Marshall, armed suspect took about $300 and fled in a vehicle." "And the description you received?" Kowalski swallowed hard. "African American, dark clothing, driving a dark-colored car eastbound." Chief Parker interrupted. "That's hardly." Renee held up her hand, silencing him. "And based on that description, you pulled over a blue Honda driven by an African American woman in a navy blazer. Her eyes never left the young officers. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am," they responded in unison. "When I identified myself as a police captain, why didn't you verify my credentials?" A painful silence filled the room. Finally, Bell spoke. "We thought. We assumed you were lying to avoid arrest." For the first time since entering the station, Renee allowed a flicker of emotion to cross her face, not anger, but disappointment. "I've been on the force longer than both of you have been adults," she said quietly. "Tonight, you didn't see a captain. You didn't even see a person deserving of basic procedure. You saw a color and made assumptions that could have had dangerous consequences." Both officers stared at their shoes, weight of her words sinking in. "The video of my arrest is trending online right now," she continued. "By morning, it will be a national story. People will call for your badges, and honestly, they'd have good reason." Kowalski looked up, his eyes wet. "Captain Washington, we're truly sorry." "I'm not interested in apologies tonight," she interrupted. "What I am interested in is what happens tomorrow, and the day after that, and next year. Because this isn't just about me." Chief Parker watched her with growing respect, realizing she was taking control of a situation that could tear the department apart. "I have a decision to make," Renee said, picking up her phone. "And so do you too. But first, I need to call my family. They're worried about me." As she stepped out to make her call, the 4 remaining people in the room exchanged glances, all wondering the same thing. What would Captain Washington do next? By 9 a.m. the next morning, the video of Captain Washington's arrest had been viewed over 3 million times. News vans lined the street outside police headquarters, and the mayor's office had issued a carefully worded statement expressing deep concern and promising a thorough investigation. Inside the building, an emergency meeting had been called for all precinct commanders and senior officers. The department's largest conference room was packed to capacity. Officers lined the walls, some standing on tiptoes to see over others. The tension in the air was thick enough to touch. At the front of the room, Chief Parker stood at the podium, his face grim. "Before we begin, I want to make something clear," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "What happened last night was unacceptable. Period." He paused, scanning the room. "Captain Washington has requested to address you all. I expect every one of you to listen carefully." As Renee walked to the podium, the room fell silent. She wore her full uniform today, captain's bars gleaming on her collar. She had slept only 3 hours, spending most of the night talking with her family and considering her response. Her children had been angry, her husband worried. Her parents had reminded her of similar incidents they had faced decades ago. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "By now, you've all seen the video or heard what happened. I was handcuffed and nearly taken to jail by 2 of our own officers while coming home from a community meeting." She let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "I could stand here and tell you how it felt to have my colleagues treat me like a criminal. I could describe the humiliation of being handcuffed in the rain while neighbors I serve watched. I could talk about explaining to my teenage son why his mother was treated this way by the same department she's given 22 years to. Several officers shifted uncomfortably, eyes down. But that's not why I'm here, Renee continued. I'm here because what happened to me happens to citizens in our community every day. The difference is, I had a badge to protect me once the mistake was recognized. They don't. A collective intake of breath moved through the room. No one had expected this approach. Officers Kowalski and Bell are not monsters, she said, gesturing to where they sat in the front row, looking miserable. They're products of a system that too often teaches police to see threats instead of people. They made a serious mistake based on assumptions and fear, not facts and training. Chief Parker watched her with a mixture of surprise and growing respect. He had expected anger, demands for punishment. Instead, she was taking the conversation in an entirely different direction. Firing these officers might satisfy those calling for justice, but it won't solve the real problem, Renee stated firmly. The real problem is much bigger than 2 young officers. It's about how we train, who we hire, what we prioritize, and how we hold ourselves accountable. She pulled out a folder and placed it on the podium. This is a proposal I've been working on for 6 months. It outlines a complete overhaul of our training and community engagement protocols. After last night, I'm no longer asking for your consideration. I'm telling you all that this is happening. The room remained silent, dozens of eyes fixed on her. Starting next week, every officer in this department will participate in a new training program that I will personally oversee. Those who resist will be invited to seek employment elsewhere. A few nervous glances were exchanged, but no one spoke up. The easy path would be to blame 2 individuals and move on, Renee said, her voice softening slightly. The harder path is to acknowledge that what happened last night was a symptom, not the disease. I'm choosing the harder path, and I expect each of you to join me. As she stepped away from the podium, something unexpected happened. From the back of the room, someone began to clap. The applause spread slowly at first, then faster, until most of the room was on their feet. Not everyone joined in. Some officers remained seated, arms crossed, but enough stood that Captain Washington knew she had a chance to create real change. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time since the handcuffs had clicked around her wrists, she felt a glimmer of hope. 3 days after the incident, Captain Renee Washington sat in her living room surrounded by people pulling her in different directions. On her right, community activist Deacon James Turner from New Hope Baptist Church. On her left, Police Union Representative Sergeant Mike Hoffman. Across from her, her husband David and their 2 children. The tension in the room was as thick as the steam rising from untouched cups of coffee on the table. You have a historic opportunity here, Renee, Deacon Turner said, leaning forward with intensity. The video has over 12 million views. CNN called twice today. You could force real accountability, not just in Minneapolis but nationwide. Sergeant Hoffman shook his head, and burn down your career in the process. Those officers made a mistake, yes, but turning this into a media circus hurts everyone, including you. He lowered his voice. The union can make sure those 2 are properly disciplined, but going public with demands will create divisions that last for years. David, who had barely spoken all evening, finally broke his silence. What about our family? Jamal's already had kids at school asking if his mom got arrested. Maya's college roommates recognized her last name. He reached for Renee's hand. Whatever you decide, we're behind you. But this affects all of us. Renee glanced at her children. 17-year-old Jamal sat with shoulders hunched, trying to look tough, but clearly bothered by the situation. Maya, home from her sophomore year at college, watched her mother with worried eyes that held a hint of pride. Mom, people are saying you should sue the department, Maya said quietly. Or quit and become a full-time advocate, Jamal added. Marcus's dad said you could probably get a book deal. Renee sighed, feeling the weight of all their expectations. Her phone buzzed again, another news outlet requesting an interview. She received calls from 3 civil rights attorneys offering to represent her, 2 book agents, and even a Hollywood producer interested in her inspiring story. Everyone wants me to be either a victim or a hero, she said finally, but I'm a police captain. That's the job I chose, the oath I took, and the position I've earned. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the reporters still camped at the end of her driveway. Deacon Turner, you want me to use this moment to force change from the outside. Mike, you want me to handle this quietly within the system. She turned back to face them. I'm going to do neither. Both men started to protest, but Renee held up her hand. I've spent 22 years trying to change things from within, one small step at a time. Too slow, but I've also seen what happens when reforms are forced by outsiders. They get resisted, sabotaged, or forgotten as soon as the spotlight moves on. She picked up a thick folder from the coffee table, the training proposal she had presented at the department meeting. This program was going to be voluntary before. Now it's mandatory. The chief has given me full authority to implement it, with proper funding and resources. A small smile crossed her face. It's amazing how quickly bureaucratic barriers disappear when there's a viral video involved. Deacon Turner frowned. You're trusting the same department that handcuffed you in the rain to suddenly embrace change? No, Renee replied firmly. I'm using my position, my experience, and yes, this unfortunate incident, to create change that can't be ignored or undone. This isn't about punishment or headlines. It's about fixing a broken system from the inside out. She walked over to her children, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. When I was your age, my father told me there are two ways to face injustice. You can point at it, or you can step up and fix it. I'm choosing to fix it. David stood and put his arm around his wife. They'll fight you every step of the way. Some will, Renee acknowledged. But not all, and those officers who handcuffed me, they're going to become my most visible success stories. Sergeant Hoffman looked skeptical. You want to work with them? After what they did? I don't want to, Renee said, her voice firm. I'm going to, because that's the choice that will actually make a difference. As her guests departed with mixed reactions, Captain Washington sat down at her kitchen table and began to outline the most ambitious police reform initiative Minneapolis had ever seen. One that would start with two officers who had made the biggest mistake of their careers. The basement training room of the Minneapolis Police Department had never been so full. Officers sat shoulder to shoulder, some looking interested, others clearly resentful. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Captain Renee Washington entered the room, accompanied by an unexpected pair, Officers Bell and Kowalski. Good morning, Renee began, standing confidently at the front. Welcome to day one of the Recognition and Response Training Program. This is not sensitivity training. This is not diversity awareness. This is practical, tactical training that will make you better officers. She nodded toward Bell and Kowalski, who stood uncomfortably beside her. Officers Bell and Kowalski have volunteered to assist me with this program. Their participation took courage, and I expect you all to respect that. A murmur went through the room. Volunteered. Everyone knew these officers had nearly destroyed their careers by arresting their own captain. This had to be some form of punishment. 2 weeks ago, Renee continued, these officers made assumptions based on limited information that led to my wrongful detention. Today, they're going to help us understand exactly what happened and how to prevent similar mistakes. Officer Bell stepped forward, his voice shaky at first but growing steadier as he spoke. I had been on patrol for 11 hours that night. When the robbery call came in, all I heard was black suspect, dark car. Captain Washington's vehicle was blue, not black. She was wearing business clothes, not clothing matching the actual suspect. But I saw what I expected to see. A threat, not a person. The room fell silent as the young officer's honesty sank in. We're starting this program with something unusual, Renee announced, pressing a button on her laptop. The lights dimmed, and video footage appeared on the screen. The actual bodycam recordings from Bell and Kowalski the night they arrested her. The room watched in uncomfortable silence as the scene unfolded from the officer's perspective. When the lights came back on, several officers couldn't meet Renee's eyes. Others looked thoughtful, a few defensive. That footage isn't easy to watch, she acknowledged. But it shows something important. At no point did these officers ask basic questions or follow standard verification procedures. They operated on autopilot, driven by assumptions. For the next 3 hours, Renee led the group through a detailed breakdown of what should have happened that night. She introduced role-playing scenarios where officers practiced proper traffic stops with minimal information. Community members, real residents from diverse neighborhoods, participated as volunteers, providing immediate feedback on how the officers' approaches made them feel. Your safety matters, Renee emphasized repeatedly, but so does the dignity of every person you interact with. These are not opposing goals. By lunch break, even some of the most skeptical officers were engaged in the discussion. The afternoon session moved to the shooting range, but with a twist. Instead of standard targets, officers faced complex video simulations requiring split-second decisions about whether someone was holding a weapon or a harmless object. At the end of the day, Renee gathered everyone in a circle. This program isn't about making you feel guilty. It's about making you more effective. Every wrongful arrest, every unnecessary use of force, every moment a citizen feels humiliated instead of protected, these all damage our ability to do our real job, keeping people safe. She handed out evaluation forms, encouraging honest feedback. Officer Bell and Kowalski will be working with me for the next 6 months, helping train every shift in the department. They're not being punished, they're helping lead a transformation. As officers filed out, many stopped to speak quietly with Renee. Some offered support, others asked questions, a few even shared their own stories of mistakes made in the field. Outside the training room, Chief Parker waited. "How did it go?" he asked. Renee handed him the stack of evaluation forms. "It's a start. Some will resist, others will embrace it, but they're all thinking about it, and that's step one." As she walked to her office, Renee passed the department's wall of honor, where her own photograph hung among other ranking officers. For the first time since the incident, she felt certain she had made the right choice. Not the easiest one, but the one that might actually create lasting change. 18 months after the rainy night that changed everything, Captain Renee Washington stood on a small stage in the City Hall courtyard. Behind her sat the mayor, the police chief, and several community leaders. Before her, a mixed crowd of citizens and officers filled every available chair. When we launched the Recognition and Response program, she began, many people were skeptical. Some called it a PR stunt. Others said one training program couldn't change decades of ingrained behavior. She smiled, looking out at familiar faces in the audience. "Today, I'm proud to share the results of our first year and a half." Renee clicked a remote, bringing up the first slide on the large screen beside her. Charts and graphs displayed significant changes. Complaints against officers down 43%, use of force incidents reduced by 37%, and community satisfaction ratings up 28%. "These numbers tell part of the story," she continued. "But the real changes are harder to measure. They happen in brief moments, when an officer takes an extra 30 seconds to explain why they pulled someone over, when a teenager feels comfortable approaching a patrol car to ask for directions, when a mistake is avoided because an officer sees a person first, not just a potential threat." In the front row, Officers Bell and Kowalski sat in their dress uniforms. Both had been promoted to training officers, specializing in the program they had helped build. Neither had expected their lowest professional moment to become the foundation for their most meaningful work. "The program we developed here is now being adopted by 12 other police departments across the country," Renee announced. "Next month, I'll be speaking at a national conference about our approach. What began as a painful incident has become a model for positive change." She stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage, making her presentation more personal. "I could have made different choices after my wrongful arrest. I could have sued the department, left law enforcement entirely, or simply stayed quiet and let things continue as they were. Many people urged me to take those paths." The crowd listened intently as Renee spoke without notes, from the heart. "But I believe in this work too much to walk away. I believe in the possibility of change, even when it's difficult. And I've seen firsthand that transformation is possible, not just in policies but in people." She gestured toward Bell and Kowalski. These officers could have been scapegoats. Instead, they became champions for a new approach to policing. Their courage in facing their mistakes and working to correct them has inspired others to do the same. From the back of the audience, Marcus Gaines, the student who had recorded the original incident and was now in the police academy himself, nodded in agreement. "We still have much work to do," Renee acknowledged. "One program cannot erase generations of mistrust or solve every challenge we face. but it's a beginning that proves change is possible when we're brave enough to look honestly at our failures and committed enough to learn from them. As she concluded her speech, something unexpected happened. An elderly woman rose slowly from her seat. Mrs. Johnson, from the community meeting Renee had attended the night of her arrest. "I've lived in this city for 73 years, the woman said, her voice carrying surprisingly well. "I've seen promises come and go, but this time I've seen real change. My grandchildren feel differently about the police than I ever did, and that's because of Captain Washington's work." The audience rose in a standing ovation, officers and community members alike. Chief Parker approached the microphone as the applause finally quieted. "It is my honor today to announce that effective next month, Renee Washington will be promoted to Deputy Chief of Community Relations and Training, a new position created specifically to expand the work she has pioneered." As congratulations poured in and hands were shaken, Renee found a quiet moment to text her family. "It's official. All your sacrifices these past months have been worth it." Her husband's reply came instantly. "We never doubted it for a minute. Not everyone can turn handcuffs into hope. That's why we love you." Standing in the sunshine of that perfect autumn day, Deputy Chief Washington, soon to be, looked out at the city she had served for nearly 25 years. The path forward would still have challenges, but for the first time in her career, she could see how a single difficult moment, handled with grace and determination, could truly transform an entire system.